Welcome to How to Make a Bow Drill Spindle by the Survival Garage. When making a bow drill spindle, you're going to want to pick some tools first that will allow you to make this spindle easily and quickly. You don't need all three of these here. This is a Fisker's 14-inch sold by Gerber, a Koster's Bushcraft, and a Swiss Army knife that's got a pocket clip on it, but I only use the Swiss Army knife for the saw. The saw really comes in handy for making a lot of components on the bow. So a Swiss Army knife, if you had one tool, that would be the one thing to have. But having all three of these will definitely make your life easier. When selecting wood, there's many woods to be selected. I would select basswood if you're going to make it for the first time. In fact, go to any hobby store and pick up just a chunk of basswood. If you are familiar with being able to select trees, white cedar is very good. Poplar isn't bad. I'm selecting a wood that's native here down in Texas, and it's a little bit tougher, but for me it works out very well to make fire with. Anyway, when selecting this, you want a fairly straight branch for just the spindle, a little bit bigger than the size of your thumb there. So I've got something that's a little bit bigger than my thumb, and what I do is I cut off a piece that's about 9 inches long. Now 9 inches is about my hand width. Now you can make a little hang loose symbol there and just use that as a general measurement. The knife there that's above there is a Bark River Aurora, and it's 9.5 inches long. So you're seeing there, and I even started to trim it up a little bit. You just want it straight. You want to trim off any knots, make it as smooth as possible really quickly, and then begin to fashion the spindle itself. Now the first thing you're going to want to do once you get a piece of spindle, and I'm showing you here a piece of white cedar that's been pre-manufactured. When you've got your spindle, the first thing you're going to want to do is square it up and then cut it octagonally. So what you want that to look like when you look at the top end is something like this. You've got an octagonal piece, again the same length, about 9 inches long, and if you've gone to a hobby store or to Home Depot or Lowe's or something like that, just set up your rip fence, rip it down to about 1.5 to 2 inches square, and then take your knife and make that as octagonal as possible. This is what one of those would look like then if you pre-manufacture, and you can see how big that is, about an inch, inch and a half is what that's going to look like. Now when you get done cutting it down to 9 inches and making it octagonal, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to sharpen up both ends, and I'll zoom in on both ends for you here. On the left hand side you've got a much sharper angle. What that is for the portion that's going to go into your top rock or your top bearing. You want as little bit of friction as possible up there. You don't want any friction going into your handhold. One, it warms up the handhold, and two, you're going to lose speed and create friction up in the handhold, which is where you don't want it. You want as little as possible. So you're going to want to make that fairly sharp and a fairly long tapered point. Keep it strong, but long taper and as sharp as possible. Now if we look at the other side, you can see that that one is fairly blunted. I just start cutting that at about a 45-degree angle and cut that down. And again, if you're using some pre-manufactured wood, which is what I would do for your first time out, this is what that's going to look like out of pre-manufactured wood. Again, left-hand side here, zooming in, you've got a fairly blunt edge. You want that blunt edge to make as much friction as possible at the end of the hearth. You want that to make friction to create a coal, and then you want the other end to not have much friction and just be allowed to create downward pressure by the top bearing and then also be held in place. After you've got both ends sharp, here again is a look at the sharp end, and then you're also going to get another look at the dull end there. That's going to go against the fireboard or the hearth. Here's what it's going to look like once you start working with the hearth. You want that again as dull as possible. This is another example. It almost looks like an acorn tip. Once you get that as dull but able to take a point, you're going to take your knife point with your hearth, and this will be a different video, but you're going to create a divot. And let me show you this next portion here. Here's what you are going to end up with once you've started burning in that spindle. You're going to end up with a depression here. And if you take a look at the spindle here, and I'm going to zoom in, you can see what that's going to look like. And almost all of them look like this. A perfectly round bowl, and then a perfectly round spindle to mate in to that hearth. You want that mating to be perfect, and you can excel that along by blunting that one end and keeping the other end as sharp as possible to create as little bit of friction as possible. So you can see what you're shooting for here on that blunt end. You're going to want a tip down there. You don't want to blunt it so much that it's just round, but you're going to want a tip down there to start in there. But if you get it too sharp down at the hearth end, it starts to drill and actually drill through the wood. You want it to create friction. You do want it to drill a little bit. It's got to shave off little bits of wood and form inside the notch that you're going to cut out. I'll teach you that in later videos. You're going to want it to shave off wood, but you don't want it to shave off so much wood that the pieces are too big. They can't start on fire, or you drill all the way through your wood. So definitely blunt that edge up, sharpen up the other edge. Use about an 8 to 9 inch piece, hang loose width on your hand, or even a little bit longer. And then you're just going to want to octagonal it out so it can grab a hold of the string and get to work. There isn't a ton of work in this spindle. It is a fairly easy thing to make, but definitely take your time. This is going back to one of the previous shots that you've got. You want it as straight as possible. You want it to spin freely. If it's bent or anything like that, it's going to wobble and cause problems for you, and you definitely don't want that. Now, one thing I do want to mention before I finish up this video is that the longer the spindle, within reason, the longer the spindle you've got, the easier it is off the brake when you're starting these to make a fire. Now, here's why. If you have a small spindle and if you start wobbling, which is what's going to happen right away because you're just not used to it, you don't have good form, you don't know how to lock in, and I'm going to show you form later in other videos as well, you're going to start rocking back and forth a little bit. And if you rock, let's say, an inch, and that causes, 2 degrees in the head of the spindle at where it meets the hearth, that's what's going to happen, and you'll see it when you start practicing. That spindle will kick out on you and sometimes fly across the yard, fly across your garage, wherever you're practicing. The shorter the spindle, you move 2 inches and it creates more degree at the head. If you move 2 inches with a longer spindle, it's going to move fewer degrees and it might be much less likely to kick out. So create a spindle that you can get good head speed and get good smoke going on with it. That's as long as you can be at first. I've seen some people, Les Stroud for instance, use a section of broom handle that was almost 24 inches long, no problem making fire off of that. Again, I use 9, but I've used 10, 11, 12, 13 inches. Feel free to do something that's comfortable. Now I'm 6'5", so a little bit taller of a person might want to use a little bit longer of a spindle because it's going to be more comfortable. If you're a little shorter, you can get closer down the ground, or you're a little bit more flexible. Feel free to use what's comfortable for you. Again, so get out there, manufacture this, and get to work. And thanks for watching this video. Take a look at the extra videos that are coming up on hearths, and this has been the Survival Garage.